What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Friday, December 1st edition of the NBA Lineup Generator video. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. We have a 6-game NBA slate tonight, and it looks quite a bit different than it did this morning on the strategy show. Luka Doncic has been ruled out for personal reasons, so we do have more value than we did this morning. We also have a stronger mid-range, thanks in large part to Kyrie Irving emerging as one of the most popular plays on the slate. And we're going to walk through all of that for DraftKings and FanDuel using the NBA lineup generator. But first, make sure that you hit the like button, whether you're watching this on YouTube or on Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you get an alert when all of our shows go live. If you are new to watching this video, I am going to use our NBA lineup generator to walk through the DraftKings and FanDuel slates, as I said. If you're not familiar with the tool, we are going to walk through how it works and how it will help your game as well as we go through these slates. And we're going to start on the DraftKings side here. And the first option that you're going to have is the ability to choose the types of lineups that you want to see, whether you want to see all types of lineups, only chalky lineups, more balanced lineups, or contrarian lineups. That's up to you. I'm going to choose contrarian lineups. I would recommend these if you are playing larger field tournaments. If you're playing smaller field stuff, looking to balanced or chalky is going to make sense. We have a description down here at the bottom as well, if you forget. But for the video, I'm going to choose contrarian. And then the next option is whether or not you want to lock in a player, and if so, who that player is. I don't recommend doing this if you are playing a lot of lineups. Like if you're playing a 20 max, that's not something I would do. But if you're only playing one lineup or three lineups, whatever it may be, and you know you want Kyrie Irving, there's no reason to waste your time looking at lineups that don't have Kyrie Irving. So save yourself some time and click him. But for this video, I'm going to skip that. And then on the next screen, you're going to start seeing your lineups. And the way the lineup generator works basically is that it is utilizing our player projections, our ownership projections, and our simulation models on the back end. And it's providing you with the end result, which are lineups that we project to be profitable in the long run. So any lineup that is presented to you is a lineup that we expect to make money over time. And then it's just a matter of figuring out which lineups you want to play. And it essentially works like a dating app would, where you can discard the lineups that you don't like. You can keep the ones that you do until you have up to 20 lineups that you can then export to DraftKings or FanDuel, whichever you're playing. And looking at the individual lineups, you can see the salary, the projected fantasy points, and the projected ownership. And then down here at the bottom, you have these two sliding scales, which are pretty important and useful because a fantasy point projection and an ownership projection by themselves mean absolutely nothing. It's a matter of how they compare to the alternatives on a slate. So with this lineup, for example, you can see that it projects relatively well compared to the best possible projected lineup. And the ownership is coming in somewhere between chalky and contrarian. So it's not like it's the most chalky lineup, but it does still project well. It just looks like a good overall lineup. And then you can see each individual player, what their salary is, their fantasy point projection, their ownership. And then one of the more useful features here, as far as customization goes, are these arrows over on the right-hand side. Let's say you get this lineup and you don't want Devin Vassell. You love everything else in here, but you just really don't like Devin Vassell for whatever your reason may be. You can click these arrows over here on the right. And once again, you'll be able to see how much salary you used. So because this is DraftKings, you have $200 to work with. Devin Vassell is $6,500. So you're going to just see every guard option. You scroll down until you get to $6,700 because that's what you have left. And you see your options to replace Vassell. Derek White projects slightly better. He's similarly owned. So like in this lineup, for example, Devin Vassell's role is that one, he is a good enough play from a fantasy standpoint, from a projection standpoint rather, but he's only 3.5% owned. So you probably wouldn't want to, if there were one here, which there isn't, you probably wouldn't want to say, oh, well, so-and-so projects 1 point better, but he's 40% owned, because clearly Vassell's role in this lineup is to help make it more contrarian. But somebody like Derek White very easily could replace Devin Vassell in this lineup if you like him more. All you'd have to do is click the arrows here, and he's going to go into that lineup. So that's one way that you can customize these. I know that a lot of people want some sort of thumbprint on the lineups that they play. It's not that much fun necessarily to just take a lineup that's created for you, throw it into a tournament, and then see if it wins or not. But that is one way you can customize your lineups if there's something you don't like about them. Now, for this video, I'm going to just save the first 20 lineups that are presented to me. If you are playing on your own, I would recommend spending a little bit more time figuring out exactly which lineups you like. Now, on the next screen over here on the right-hand side, you can see the individual player exposures for the 20 lineups that you saved. So Kyrie Irving and Seth Curry are both in 75% of them. Kevin Durant is in 70%, which is really interesting. Derek Lively, 50%. Jaden Hardy, 50%. Josh Green, 45%. Should not be a surprise to anybody that the Mavericks are showing up very heavily without Luka. Also, no Dante Exum, so that is one backup guard that won't be stealing minutes. So they're a very popular team, but they just are easily the most mispriced team on the slate as well. So none of these guys are going to really be contrarian. We have Josh Green projected around 65%. Same for Jaden Hardy. Irving's at about 57%. Derek Jones Jr. is at about 39%. Lively's at 35%. Seth Curry coming in at 20%. But it's pretty tough to get away from these guys. They're just so cheap, and there are increased minutes and production available without Luka. Kevin Durant in 70% of our lineups. He is pulling 26% ownership right now. We get to 45% Danilo Gallinari, 30% on Desmond Bane and Franz Wagner in a good matchup against Washington. Derek Jones Jr. coming in at 25%, the same as Derrick Rose and Tim Hardaway Jr. One thing I do like to point out here, though, is I think that sometimes people would say, well, I wanted contrarian lineups. Why are we getting to all these popular guys? It also matters, who's not in your lineup. So when you go through some of these individual lineups, it's very likely that you're going to see that some of the most popular guys are not in there. And so looking at this first lineup up here at the top, 192.5% aggregate ownership, 261 fantasy point projection. We have a very popular Kyrie Irving, Seth Curry, Derek Jones Jr., only 12% ownership coming to Banchero, Derek Lively coming in at 35%. Devin Vassell, as we talked about before, 3% owned, an important piece of this lineup at that ownership. Jaren Jackson and Jakob Poeltl. So you only have one guy in this lineup that is sub 10%. But looking at the most popular players on the slate, Josh Green is projected for 65 to 66% ownership. He is not in this lineup. So it's already different than 65% of the field. Tim Hardaway Jr. is not in this lineup. He's projected for 39% ownership. So it doesn't have him. Derrick Rose, 36% ownership, not in this lineup. Kevin Durant, 26%. Grant Williams, 22%. None of those guys are in this lineup. So it's only one part of being contrarian is the, what everybody talks about, having the 3% owned guy that does great. That helps you win. Absolutely. If Devin Vassell goes for 55 fantasy points today, this lineup has a really, really good chance of being good. But the other part of being contrarian is who you don't have. And when you don't have some of the highest owned guys on the slate in a lineup, it does still make you relatively contrarian. So that is something to keep in mind, especially on slates like this. I think a big mistake people make is they hear you need to be contrarian to win tournaments. And yes, it helps, but there are different ways to do that depending on the slate. And it's generally going to be a big mistake to go into a slate like this and say, everybody's playing Dallas, I'm not going to play the Mavericks guys, because your lineups are going to project so much more poorly than lineups that have the Mavericks guys. So it becomes a matter of figuring out how you can make everything work so that you're getting to the best plays while also not having a ton of overlap with the field in any individual lineup. That's why this tool is so useful. Like I said, it uses our simulation tools on the back end to determine lineups that we expect to be profitable. And part of that is finding the right balance between projection and being contrarian. And that's what you're seeing here. Now we're going to switch over to the FanDuel side and do the same thing. But first, if you are interested in using this tool for yourself, you can sign up using the link in the description below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching on Twitter, I will tweet the link below as well. It is $14.95 per week. It is perfect for you if you're a single entry, 3 max, 20 max, whatever it may be player. We designed this with the smaller field, lower stakes player in mind. And the reason is that it can be really difficult when you are starting out in DFS, or even if you're not starting out, you just are comfortable playing lower stakes stuff. That's what you have the bankroll for. It can be very difficult to find the balance between utilizing tools that are going to improve your game and make you better, and not spending so much money on those tools that no matter how good they make you, it's going to be hard for you to make money. If you're playing $80 a night, the $4.20 max on DraftKings, it's going to be really, really, really hard for you to make money if you are spending $200 on our NBA Sims package. Now, ultimately, that's where that should be your goal, is to move up, progress, make money, profit, and move up to where you're utilizing better tools that give you more input into what you're doing. But we created this tool with the idea that you don't have all the same customization options as the full Sims tool. You don't have the same inputs and ability to do everything that you can in the Sims tool, but you're still getting the results, the end results of what the Sims model is doing behind the scenes, what our projections are, what our ownership projections are, and you're getting quality lineups that should improve your performance at a price point that isn't going to make it impossible for you to profit at DFS and eventually move up in stakes to where you can play the more exciting, bigger tournaments. And, then maybe it does make sense for you to buy the Sims package. But there's a large percentage of people that it just would make no sense for you to pay the monthly price that would cost. And we don't want to leave you out in the cold with no way to improve your DFS game. So we are offering this for $14.95 per week. Highly recommend checking it out, signing up with the link below. Now, looking at the FanDuel side, we're once again going to go with the contrarian lineups. We're not going to lock anybody in, and I'm going to save the first 20 lineups that I see for the sake of time. And then we can see how things look different compared to DraftKings. Now, DraftKings pricing this year has generally been a lot tighter than FanDuel. So usually what happens in these videos, and it looks like it's happening again today, is a lot of the player names that show up on DraftKings are pretty ugly. And then on FanDuel, it looks a lot better. And that's what you're seeing here too, just because pricing is softer. Kyrie Irving is in every single lineup I clicked. That's not really surprising. He's getting 83% ownership. He is $8,300 on FanDuel. It is an insane price. He was going to be a good play there, even if Luka was in. Luka out just makes this unbelievable. Josh Green at 4,400, showing up in 70% of our lineups. He is projected for 34% ownership. Pascal Siakam at a cheap $7,800 price tag, showing up 55%. Tim Hardaway Jr. also very inexpensive at $4,800, showing up in 40% of lineups. He is questionable, so we need to keep an eye on that. Kevin Durant without Devin Booker, showing up 35% of the time. We're getting to 30% Jaden Hardy, Kyle Kuzma, Herb Jones, 25% apiece on Paolo Banchero, Julius Randle, who is also questionable, Denny Avdia, Zach Collins. So names here are a little bit better. One thing I did not point out on the DraftKings side that is useful and is important. Another way that you can customize your lineups. Let's say you go through, you find the 20 lineups that you like. Obviously, it's very difficult to mentally track who is in every lineup that you select. So then you get to this page, you get the player exposures. And let's just say you're like, I don't want 70% Josh Green. I want it to be 60%. You can click Josh Green. He's going to turn yellow. And then all of your Josh Green lineups are going to be highlighted over here on the left and put in order. You can scroll through whatever metrics you want to use to decide which ones you want to get rid of, whether it's the most popular ones, the lowest projected ones, the ones with some player you don't want, whatever it may be. But all you're going to do is you're going to go in, you're going to click the lineup, and then you're going to go in and either use the arrows, like I talked about before, to swap Josh Green out, or just discard the lineup. And I said we wanted to get down to 60%. So discard 2 lineups. And then you just go down here to get more lineups. It takes you back to the previous screen. You grab 2 lineups that do not have Josh Green, which actually happened to be the first 2. So that was easy. And now we're down to 60%. And now obviously there are repercussions to that where you get rid of Josh Green. Maybe you're losing lineups that had somebody you liked, or you're getting more of somebody you didn't like, whatever it may be. So play around with it. You might have to kind of do it a few different times on a few different players, but that's a very, very easy, simple way to manage your exposures. And now this top lineup looks pretty interesting. 307 fantasy point projection, which is right around where we're getting on most of these lineups, but only 230% ownership. So it is a little bit lower owned. We are getting Cole Anthony, 6,900, 9.5% owned. Good matchup for him against the Wizards. Not the best price tag. And the ownership is going to be relatively low because you do have so many good guard value plays now. Jordan Goodwin, 4,700 with no Devin Booker, 2% owned. A little bit more expensive than I would like to pay for him, but he should get enough run where you do have a nice ceiling for him. Kyrie Irving and Jaden Hardy both showing up. Again, 83% ownership to Irving. I don't really know the way around that. He is very, very clearly underpriced here. Jaden Hardy at 3,700 getting 26% ownership. Desmond Bane and Josh Green are your small forwards at 23 and 34% ownership, respectively. They both look very good. Desmond Bane looks very good because he's Desmond Bane. Josh Green looks very good because he's cheap and Luka's not playing. Scotty Barnes and Pascal Siakam, both strong plays from Toronto. Barnes only getting 10% ownership, so pretty contrarian option there. And then Zach Collins rounding things out at 21%. Now, this is another lineup where nobody, with the exception of Jordan Goodwin, nobody is super low owned here. You have a couple 10% owned guys plus Jordan Goodwin, but this lineup doesn't have Tim Hardaway, who's projected for 59% ownership. It doesn't have Derrick Rose, who's projected for 45% ownership. It doesn't have Paolo Banchero or Brandon Ingram, who are projected for about 35% ownership apiece. So while it is a popular lineup, if you're just looking at the ownership of most of the players, it doesn't have 4 of the 5 highest owned guys on this slate. So it's still going to be contrarian basically by subtraction or by who it doesn't have, which, like I said before, is a really useful way to think about it when you have slates like this, where one team or one set of players is really, really standing out as guys that are very difficult to get away from. So that's all I have for you in this video. Check out the link below. Sign up through the link below to use this tool for yourself. $14.95 per week. Other than that, thank you for checking out the video. Good luck on your lineups tonight, and enjoy your weekend.